like they're just going to give us the pictures of the book. But if you go to the library, that's, I guess, where it was made, but it's currently housed at the library in Dublin in Trinity College. So you could visit it. There it is in the glass case, I guess. So that's pretty interesting. But why is it so neat? It's considered a classic art of Celtic design. So all the different colored works in the manuscript are Celtic. Okay. So he began writing and publishing, as you know. One of his books is an essay toward a new theory of vision. And that what fascinated me with that one is he's the one that realized that by having two eyes, we can tell distance of things. I mean, if you think about it, we all know from childhood, that's too far for me to reach, right? And stuff, right? And how do we learn that? We don't even think about it, but because we have two eyes, and by the way, there are people that only have one, or have trouble with, my wife, for example. I've told you she's got brand new eyes now. That happened recently, but she was one of those that grew up as a kid with glasses on, with a strap, because kids can't keep them on. And she had one eye that just, had to be surgically cut. And they did it too late for it actually to affect her ability to perceive depth. So she was a very scary driver. She doesn't drive anymore, even though her eyes are now better than mine, which is weird, because I can see her reading to our grandchildren without glasses. That seems so weird. But in any case, she doesn't want to drive anymore, and it hasn't corrected her depth perception for some reason. So but he's the one that figured that out. There were a couple other things that's kind of interesting also about that. But so objects or ideas of sight have nothing in common with the objects of touch. They're a totally different sense perception of things, and yet, you obviously automatically put things together. Did I mention that Aristotle recognized that that was a different task? That we see things, here's all the different senses, but somehow we think of them as all the same thing, that we're touching, smelling, tasting, etc. And so Aristotle, said that that's because there's a common sense which puts those all together. A separate sense in the brain somehow that takes all those different senses and puts them together in common. So yes, he's using the concept of common sense, but that's not the way we use it normally when we're talking about, hey, it's common sense. You don't walk into the door, you open it first, whatever you might want to use, which maybe isn't common sense if you're drunk, which is a good reason why you shouldn't get drunk, I think, because your common sense goes, etc. Okay. That was a critique of drinking, by the way. If you've seen the little thingies on the wall, do you have them in the ladies' room? It gives you happy spring, etc., and reminders, don't drink, and exercise. Yeah, that. Very good. Okay. I don't know if you actually read those or not. I do, but. Well, you should be a philosophy major then. Yeah, that'll just put you right. Well, thank you. So the connection of sight and touch is arbitrary and learned by experience only. The connection is arbitrary, but it is regular and constant. What we see suggests to us what we may expect to touch and handle. And using sight to guide our movements, we interpret the language of God. Interesting, if you're familiar with the book, The Language of God. It's a new book by the doctor who led the Genome Project. Francis Collins, who also plays the guitar, by the way. None of you were here, but years ago when his book came out, this book, The Language of God, Francis Collins was our convocation speaker and was here and performed or gave a speech in the Wendy Williamson and played his guitar for us. That was really quite nicely done. He's interesting. But what he means by the language of God is genetics. Kind of, remember when we were talking about other ways of modeling the universe, and one of the models gives you the sense that all the planets are kind of moving kind of like that, etc. And so you get the idea that there's some kind of algorithm that's the basics of the universe, and that algorithm, how that works, is the language of God, so to speak. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know how close the two of these points of view would be in saying things like that. So one of the main books that people use to read his philosophy is the Three Dialogues of Philonous, which means love of mind. Phila means love, in the like Philadelphia, brotherly love, which has one of the highest murder rates in any of the United States cities. Sorry. Chicago, I think, is much worse, right? In any case. But the opponent is helos, which means matter in Greek. And so it's basically a dialogue between matter and love of mind. And helos represents Locke. Remember, I asked the question, what do you think of Locke's materialism? And the idea that at root there's this solid matter, that's binding everything, that we can't actually see, hear, touch, taste, or smell, right? For Locke. And what Berkeley does with this dialogue is point out that if you're going to say that there's real stuff that we can't see, hear, taste, etc., we can't know it, then you can't actually prove that it's there. And you can only become skeptical, which I said Hume will take it the next one step. For Berkeley, his argument is that it's all in the mind of God. Now, I don't understand exactly how he's using this. My thinking, because I'm weird that way, is that he and Leibniz are together on this, and that what he's talking about is spirit is energy. And if he's talking that way, he's very contemporary, because actually we don't, today, a physicist would not say that we're actually seeing matter. What we're seeing is energy. And so the conundrum they have of how can energy or spirit, our mind, interpret matter where there's no interconnectivity between them, there's nothing in common, so there's no way that we can actually interact with matter. Well, if matter turns out to be energy itself, then of course it can, right? So if our minds are energy and matter is energy in an arrangement, there's no problem in understanding how like interconnects with like, as they were talking about in the movie Mind Walk, right? It's interconnections, interconnecting with other interconnections, et cetera, et cetera. That's all very coherent to think of it that way. And I think that might be the better interpretation of what George Berkeley and Leibniz are both talking about. That's an interpretation, though. You know, if you're taking the GSAT or something, to pass your, to get into graduate school, the official version is that George Berkeley's an idealist, and so everything's in the mind of God, and it's all ideas, right? So there's no actual physical existence of anything apart from it being existing in the mind of God. So it's kind of a nuanced idea there. For me, I'm just giving Berkeley and Leibniz the credit and saying that they were well ahead of their day and are essentially in agreement with the way contemporary physicists view things. So the main difference is that our vocabulary says we have energy and mass. They were saying spirit and matter. And so that's the big change that I see. But Berkeley does say that this is all the mind of God, that everything is explained as the mind of God, and as a result, we still need to be dependent on God for our understanding of nature, etc. And so, as a bishop, he is trying to persuade people to continue to think of the importance of God, right? One of his critiques, by the way, is against Sir Isaac Newton. He's if you think of it, Sir Isaac Newton is another one of those who thinks everything is made of matter, and he's in his critique or argument with Leibniz. Leibniz is of the view that everything is relative, so that motion and things are relative, whereas Sir Isaac Newton thinks that everything is fixed in space. So it's Euclidean, that there's an actual physical space where things move around in this physical space, right? When you look at it from Leibniz's point of view, and of course Einstein's point of view, where anything might be located is dependent on the observer's point of view. And of course, you have different observers, so you have different perspectives of where things are, where the center of something is, time, how time interacts. His great experiment, Einstein experiment with time. Yes? No? Maybe so? Einstein. Which means one mug. Ein, one. Stein, a mug. Ein mug.
One mug.
Right? One mug. That's just true. It's not my fault. So Einstein, you have to say Albert. Okay, that's not the one I was looking for, though. There it is. Okay. Well, you can go to the museum to see this, I guess. I don't know. So time is relative. Not only is a clock relative. Well, shoot, that's not the one Okay, forget it. I probably wouldn't be able to do it.
You're talking about time dilation?
I was thinking of the train, with the train and the observer watching the individuals on the train, and how everything on the train looks, and the time is the same to the individual on the train, but you've got multiple people on the train, and time is dependent on where on the train you are in relation to the observer. So that basically, if you look at it through Einstein's modeling of it, you realize, well, of course, time is relative to the observer. And not just in the sense that, if you're late for something, you feel like time is going quickly, and if you're early and you're just waiting, you feel like time is going slowly. Not that way, but just in the way we calculate things. I mean, there is the great experiment where they they had one clock that was quartz clock, I forget, really accurate, and they put another exact clock with the exact same time on a jet and flew the jet, I think, all the way around the world. And when it got back to the same point and landed, it was off by a microsecond. Because of course, even a plane in the atmosphere flying is not going to be that significantly different. But according to Einstein, the whole point would be if you're flying at the speed of light or near the speed of light, time actually ceases for you. Right? So you end up, if you fly back, everybody else is aged and you're still young, even thousands of years, depending on